Hello, I'm Betsan Corkhill and I'm based in the city of Bath in the UK. I'm a former physiotherapist now working as a lifestyle health and well-being coach. I'm going to talk to you today about using knitting to improve health and well-being. So where did my interest in knitting begin? I gave up physiotherapy in 2002 because I became frustrated at the system I found myself working in. I was working in the community visiting people of all ages who for some reason weren't able to come to the physiotherapy department. I hadn't realised until I began this work just how many people live within four walls, many of whom never see another human from 1 week to the next. I'd be asked by the GP to help with their mobility, but it didn't take long to realise that Mrs. Smith wasn't getting out of her chair because she had no reason to. No purpose or meaning to her day or life. And I felt we needed to take a step back with these people. They needed social contact, social interaction, to find a purpose to each day, to develop an interest in the world, as well as ongoing longer-term support to improve their well-being before they could be expected to make the lifestyle changes needed. It can never be achieved in the 4 or 5 times that I was allowed to visit. So I had a complete change of career and became a freelance production editor working on a range of computer and camera magazines. And eventually I ended up working for a range of craft magazines where I was put in charge of the letters pages. And this entailed reading all the letters coming in, and they'd received sacks full every day. Most of these letters spoke about the therapeutic benefits of crafts, but particularly knitting. I had stumbled across a vast treasure trove of anecdotal evidence. It was then a little light went on in my head. Could this be used to motivate the people I used to see on community rounds, to provide purposeful activity from the armchair, to spark an interest in the world again? Could something like this be used as a springboard to other activities? Because it's certainly what the letters were suggesting. So the magazines made it known that I was interested in researching this further, and knitters from around the world started sending me their stories. And as I delved deeper, I realised that there was potentially something very exciting here. There was a lot more to it, and something which could possibly change the way we treat long-term conditions. I wanted to know what was happening and how. I wanted to know the science behind all these stories. I've been researching the meditative, creative and social benefits of knitting since 2005, and what I've found is exciting. My book, Knit for Health and Wellness, How to Knit a Flexible Mind and More, gathers together my work so far, and as you can see, it's been translated into Spanish and German. I set up Stitch Links in 2005 because I recognised that people would need a safe, trustworthy source of information about using knitting therapeutically. Our newsletter now goes out to 92 countries. It was at this time that I set up a therapeutic knitting group in a pain clinic in Bath and started to really get interested in pain. But it's been a hard road. It hasn't been easy to get clinicians, scientists and researchers to consider that knitting could be used as a therapeutic tool. Everyone has their preconceptions about the word knitting. The K word has been the biggest barrier to this work. It was suggested that initially it might be a good idea to call knitting something different because I had found that the moment I mentioned the K word, people at best lost interest, or at worst laughed out loud and thought I was some evangelical knitter who'd gone a bit crazy. When ironically at the time, I was just learning to knit to do this work. So in order to get my foot in the door with clinicians, neuroscientists, academics, I had to call knitting something different. So I called it a bilateral rhythmic psychosocial intervention, just to change their perspective, to spark their interest, to pique their interest before the K word was mentioned, and it worked. Thankfully, I don't have to do this anymore. This is what one knitter told me. Knitting requires me to think creatively, to plan, prepare, organise, coordinate and control just one small aspect of my life. Then any other changes are manageable. Our bodily systems aren't simply able to change, they were designed to change in response to experience and our environment. It's called plasticity. And we can learn to use this fact to our advantage. Therapeutic knitting is about using knitting to facilitate positive change. I was introduced to a whole person approach to health when I worked in Switzerland in the 70s, and thankfully the importance of this wider approach has been increasingly recognised. We need to consider our health and well-being from this wider perspective of the whole complex human within their environment, culture and world. Dr. Margaret Hanna puts it very nicely in her book Humanising Healthcare, Patterns of Hope for a System Under Strain. In it she says, health is not just the absence of disease. Becoming well is about restoring connection with life through a healthy relationship with ourselves, other people and the wider world. I've been collecting stories from knitters around the world since 2005, and I became intrigued by why some people live happy, fulfilled lives despite numerous problems, while others sink under seemingly minor issues. And these core issues came up time and time again. And it applies to us all. The other things going on in your life make a big difference to how you manage life's inevitable challenges, as well as how you manage or recover from illness. And these are very relevant to those diagnosed with dementia and their carers. And I'm making a distinction here between rewarding purposeful occupation and dutiful purposeful occupation. For me, I would regard housework as dutiful purposeful occupation. And those who are busy, stressed or ill often prioritise dutiful activities over those beneficial for their well-being. And that needs to be turned around. And these issues feed on each other to give symptoms such as stress, worry, sleep problems, irritable bowel syndrome, migraine, muscle tension and pain. And it's my experience that if these underlying core issues aren't dealt with, it becomes very difficult to deal with the symptoms. You need to deal with these issues for longer-term success. And therapeutic knitting alone and in a group can help you deal with these. I'm often asked if there's a difference between knitting and therapeutic knitting. And the idea of therapeutic knitting has evolved over the years. Therapeutic knitting is the combination of knitting and knowledge to deliberately improve well-being. It's about having knowledge about whole person health and about how you can enhance the benefits of knitting to improve well-being. So it can work if you're fit and healthy to manage stress on a day-to-day basis, as well as life's inevitable challenges, or it can be taken a step further to manage a range of medical conditions. So let's take a look now behind the K word. Knitting equals patterns of hand movement and hand position. An enriched environment. And you can choose to knit in a group with all the extra benefits that brings. In addition to the benefits listed, knitting in a group encourages the sharing of stories. It enables the building of safe, supportive networks and can help you integrate into and belong to a community. The benefits of knitting alone are different from knitting in a group, and you'll find the benefits outlined in column 2 and 3 in other creative activities. All are beneficial for your well-being. The portability of knitting is really important in its use as a therapeutic tool. It gives you a powerful tool at your fingertips anytime, anywhere, even in the middle of the night when things can often seem quite dark or on crowded public transport. It enables people to be more social because knitting acts as a self-soothing tool to manage any worries or emotions you may have in social situations. It also enables us to use it in a busy clinical environment. Along with its portability, it's this first column that sets knitting apart from other activities. The function of our hands and the information we get through them is important. Our hands have driven the development of our brains throughout evolution. Lucy was a pre-human who lived about 3.2 million years ago in eastern Africa. She was found to have an un-ape-like hand but an ape-like brain. So her hands were evolving before her brain. Bilateral coordinated patterns of movement across the midline of the body make your brain work quite hard. When you're totally absorbed in an activity like this, your brain has less capacity left to pay attention to other issues which might be detrimental to your well-being. The rhythm of the movements facilitates a meditative-like state, a sense of deep relaxation, and is instantaneously familiar, calming and relaxing. And most stories tell of the rhythm of the movements. Knitting helps me to slow down my thoughts so I can process them. It helps me shed the stress of the day. It gives me a rhythm to breathe and think and feel. The brain likes rhythmic movement because it's predictable. It makes the brain feel safe. And we engage in rhythmic repetitive movement instinctively when we're stressed. Many ancient cultures have tools that involve repetitive hand movements to ease stress and distress. You have the rosary, worry beads, worry stones. The Chinese have chime balls. Nurturing feelings of safety is hugely important for improving well-being. In our Stitchlink's Cardiff University study of over 3,500 knitters from 32 countries, one of our most significant findings was the more frequently people knit, the happier and calmer they feel. And you needed to knit more than 3 times a week. Combine this sensation of instantaneous calm with knitting's portability and you have a powerful tool you can use anytime, anywhere. This feeling of calm can help you manage stress on a day-to-day basis. You can also use knitting to significantly improve your sleep. Going back to the movements, if you give the brain a background automatic task, it seems to facilitate more free-flowing conversation and laughter. In a therapeutic setting, this can be really helpful if people find it difficult to talk. My thoughts are that the automatic nature of the movement may facilitate access to the subconscious. Automatic movements happen in the subconscious. It appears to help break patterns of rumination, and knitters tell me it gives them a break from the constant chitter-chatter of thoughts. This is a quote from a young person with paranoid schizophrenia. Knitting is the only thing that quietens the voices in her head. Some people describe it as stopping the hammering of thoughts in their head. When I knit, I reach a place of peace that I cannot reach in silence. The silence is more often so loud with negative thoughts and memories. The hand position protects your personal space. It helps people to feel safer attending a group, on public transport, or when socializing, enabling them to go out more. The combination of rhythmic bodily movement and a meditative state is important, and there's more evidence emerging that you can't control your mind with your mind, using what we call a top-down approach. But it's much more likely if you involve the body, involve bodily movement. So you're also changing the input into the brain, bottom up. Knitting has the bottom up input of the rhythmic movement and the top down effect of calm. An enriched environment is important for well-being and brain health. So I'm just going to pick out some of these now. Creativity is important for well-being, psychological flexibility, self-management, problem-solving. If you're thinking creatively, you have more options open to you. There's no doubt in my mind that it's better to be actively creative rather than being a passive recipient in life. But before you can start to think outside the box, you need a box or a framework. And I found this particularly important aspect of knitting when developing it as a healthcare tool, because many people are afraid to try new things because they're afraid of failure. So you need a safe framework within which we can nurture creative ability. And knitting has this framework of a pattern within which we can nurture creative ability to a point where people are happy to explore and experiment, to try out new ideas, to risk making a few mistakes. Those living with dementia who have knitted before often retain the ability to knit, but may not be able to follow a pattern, but can still be given the framework of a square or a rectangle to knit. Looking further at the second column of the knitting equation, regular novelty is good for us. It nurtures a healthy brain. It opens up and enriches our world. It keeps us interested in the world and more interesting to others. It also acts as a springboard to other activities, to other things, which opens up your world further. And regular novelty is easy to introduce through knitting. The importance of being successful at something has really shone through in this work. None of the people I visited on my rounds as a community physiotherapist had anything in their lives they felt successful at. The brain's reward system fires off a boost of feel-good, motivating, pain-relieving chemicals when you're successful at a task that requires a little effort. And part of the therapeutic approach is learning to set your projects at the right level, a level that requires a little effort, but at which you know you'll be successful at. Certainly at the start. Doing things and being successful at them keeps this important brain circuit healthy and also motivates you to want to try other things. It can act like a springboard to other activities and back to life. And knitting's portability enables you to be successful from an armchair or bed, and this is hugely important. And you get 3 rewards when you knit. The ongoing reward of the process, the end product, and you can choose to give this as a gift to a friend, family, or charity. And as well as the chemical aspect of reward, success enables you to rediscover lost emotions, nurture healthy curiosity. It encourages forward thinking, anticipation. It's constructive when everything else may seem negative or destructive. I remember one man telling me, "This is the first constructive thing I've done for years." It changes your perspective of yourself and the world. It changes your personal story. It helps you build a more positive identity. Knitting for charity and others is an important means of contributing to society. It's motivating. I can do it nurtures a desire to do more. Professor John Cacioppo's work into loneliness has found that we need to address the social and emotional aspects of loneliness. People need emotional nurturing. The feeling of loneliness causes stress levels to rise, the levels of perceived threat to rise. It increases inflammation. It decreases the effectiveness of sleep. So it makes a lot of sense to deal with loneliness as part of a whole person approach to well-being. It's a big problem for those living with long-term health issues, but also for their carers. Knitting groups provide a means of safe, rich social contact with people from different cultural backgrounds, a range of educational backgrounds, knitters from all walks of life and ages. It cuts across class, culture, beliefs and backgrounds. It provides a level playing field no matter what your background. And this is really important for building compassion and understanding in communities. It also helps you meet new people and build a strong, supportive network. Knitting enables social engagement. The activity makes it easier to attend a group. The common interest gives you a point of conversation that's outside yourself. It often evokes memories of childhood, watching granny or their mother knit, or making things for their own children. The hand position protects your personal space, making you feel safer. Knitting provides you with a self-soothing tool to manage any emotions or anxiety at attending a group. And you can choose whether to have eye contact or not. And we found the or not is important. It's perfectly acceptable to sit and knit quietly. It puts the knitter in complete control over how much they wish to participate. And this is really important because it's not easy to join a group for the first time. Having the opportunity to just be in the safe company of others without feeling a pressure to participate is hugely important and is an experience that many don't have the opportunity to enjoy. And it's something those living with dementia can do with their family members or carers. Both knitting alone and in a group will help you manage loneliness. Loneliness and being alone are very different. Knitting alone can also help you deal with loneliness. It enables you to learn to just be in your own company. Learning to enjoy solitude is important, and whereas loneliness raises threat level, enjoyment of solitude nurtures feelings of safety and is beneficial to your well-being. Knitting can help raise your mood. In our Stitchling's Cardiff University study, one of the most significant findings was that 81% of respondents reported feeling happier after knitting. 54% felt happy or very happy. Fewer than 1% remained sad. And excitingly, this translated across to those with clinical depression. We also found that texture is twice as significant as colour for affecting mood. If you touch something good, you feel good. So we're back to the hands and the importance of the information we get from them. A knitting artist working in a local hospital was asked to see a very distressed lady suffering from advanced dementia. She wasn't able to physically knit, but was given a ball of yarn which she immediately started to feel and stroke. She stopped screaming. She became calm and slept for the first time in weeks. The rhythmic stroking of the yarn that felt good to touch had a really powerful calming effect. We see colour and texture being used well in twiddle muffs. They keep hands warm, occupy people, and help to calm distressed minds as well as benefiting those who knitted and created them. Looking more broadly, caring for somebody living with dementia is a hugely stressful task and one where you're required to be available at all times. Knitting can help carers manage stress, improve mood and sleep, manage anxiety, and that roller coaster of emotions that being a carer brings. And being portable, it can be carried and used anywhere at any time. It's also an activity that can be picked up and dropped as necessary, and even a few seconds spent on it contributes to the end result, which can help carers feel productive. In our survey, knitters told us they learned patience, perseverance, planning, commitment. The things are never perfect, that the best way of learning is through trial and error. And interestingly, they also told us that they learned their mistakes can be undone, that you can reach your end goal despite a few detours along the way, and often that end goal is richer as a result of the lessons learned. And these are really valuable life skills. Those living with dementia will often make mistakes when they knit, but this doesn't matter. These can easily be undone when appropriate, or covered up with a large button or a crocheted flower so they become unimportant. So let's take it a step further to look at how it can fit into a busy clinical environment. The practicalities are that it's portable, the learning process involves no wasted materials, it's deliverable in kit form to an armchair or bed, it's not messy to set up or clear up, it requires no artistic talent, that reward is attainable by all. It cuts across class, culture, educational backgrounds, and it can be learned and reinforced from DVDs, books, and YouTube. Stories from knitters I've collected mention over 60 medical conditions, and many of these conditions have symptoms in common, and these are some that knitting can help with. I want to tackle some of the myths now. Yes, men can do it too, and actually the first knitters were men. Knitting was also the treatment of choice for shell shock following World War I, and this image shows soldiers being treated with knitting for shell shock or post-traumatic stress disorder following World War I at the Walter Reed Memorial Hospital in 1918. We hear a lot about knitting and mindfulness, but it's not just about mindfulness. As you will have seen from the knitting equation, it's a lot more complex. There are also a number of other mind states you can enter when you knit, and these have their benefits too. These are dependent on the project you're knitting, so have a few projects on the go that will enable you to go into a range of beneficial states of mind. People with hand pain can also knit, providing they choose the right materials and pace their knitting activity. It's very sad to see people stopping knitting because they think the movement will damage arthritic or painful hands further, when actually the movements, if practiced with the correct materials and pacing, will improve their hands. Wooden needles are generally easier. Polished birch has less friction than bamboo. And don't make the mistake of thinking big needles are better. Big needles means a heavier project. Very fine needles will also make your hands ache more. Circular needles will allow the weight of your work to rest in your lap. Pace your knitting. If your hands are very painful, you may only be able to knit 5 stitches. Stop and do another 5 in an hour's time and gradually build this up. If you have hand, arm or neck pain, try sitting a pillow on your lap and rest your hands and project on the pillow to support the weight. In this position, you only need very small movements of the fingers to make a stitch. When knitting with a person who lives with dementia, it's more a case of finding out what they've been used to and what they're able to do and experimenting. But it's not about sitting all day knitting. An important aspect of therapeutic knitting is to encourage people to get up and walk around every 20 to 30 minutes, to stretch gently and focus on a distant object. It's about using it as a tool to improve your well-being. And you don't have to be an expert for it to be therapeutic. The movements become rhythmic very quickly, so allow your mind to slow and flow into the rhythm of your hands. Therapeutic knitting is more about the process than the end product. I'm going to finish by reminding you of my knitting equation and to thank you for listening.